You know, when you hear the name George Soros, it comes loaded with all sorts of baggage, right?
Definitely. It's a name that sparks a reaction.
But before all the headlines, before the controversies, there's this surprisingly human story. Like, did you know his very first big philanthropic act wasn't some huge global thing?
Oh, yeah. What was it?
In communist Hungary, it was funding photocopiers for libraries.
Photocopiers. Huh.
Yeah. I mean, think about the power of that, right? Access to information where it was so controlled. It's that kind of detail, often overlooked, that we're getting into today on the deep dive.
Right. So you, our listeners, wanted to get past the noise, understand Soros beyond just the usual talking point.
Exactly. So we took a really close look at this source text, which digs pretty deep, goes into his background, his huge impact on finance, the philanthropy, politics, personal life. And yeah, those controversies too, they always seem to follow him.
And our goal here, basically, is to pull out the key stuff, give you a clear picture. Who is George Soros? What's he actually done? Why does he stir up so much debate?
Without getting totally bogged down in, endless detail.
Precisely. Get to the core, quick and thorough. That's the mission.
Okay, so let's start there. Who is George Soros, fundamentally?
Well, the text lays it out pretty clearly. Born György Schwartz, Hungary, 1930, later became a Hungarian-born American financier, investor, well-known philanthropist.
And the founder of the Open Society Foundations, big name there. And he's known for pushing back against market fundamentalism.
That's right. That idea that free markets with, minimal government are always the best answer. He's quite critical of that.
And obviously his reputation in finance, it's huge. Successful, sometimes controversial market moves.
Absolutely. Generated admiration and, well, a lot of criticism too. But there's this fascinating bit right at the start of the text about his father.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
His dad's escaped from a World War I POW camp in Russia. Incredible story.
Oh.
Took him 2 years, battling the elements, just to get back home to Budapest. This was before Soros was born, but you have to think.
That must have shaped the family, right? That sense of resilience, survival against the odds.
Exactly. It kind of sets the stage, doesn't it? Especially when you think about the high-stakes world he entered.
Yeah, finance. The text really positions him as one of the most successful, most influential financiers of the whole 20th century.
No doubt. Started on Wall Street back in the 50s, arbitrage, that sort of thing. Then in '69, he launched the Double Eagle hedge fund.
Which eventually became the Quantum Group.
That's the one. The engine that generated, well, his enormous wealth.
And key to that success, the text mentions this theory, reflexivity.
Ah, yes. Reflexivity. He developed that idea while he was studying at the London School of Economics. It's not just, dry economic theory.
Okay, so what is it in simple terms?
It's basically the idea that our beliefs and expectations about the market can actually change the market itself.
Ah, like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Creates these feedback loops. Think about a rumor about a stock. Even if it starts false, if enough people believe it, they sell, the price drops.
Oh, making the rumor come true. Okay, I get it. It's dynamic.
Very. And he didn't just theorize about it, he used it.
Which brings us to Black Wednesday, right? 1992. That's probably the most famous example. Remind us what happened there.
Sure. So the UK was in the European exchange rate mechanism, the ERM, trying to keep the pound stable against other European currencies.
Right.
Soros, using his reflexivity idea, basically figured the pound was overvalued within that system, that it couldn't last.
So he bet against it.
Massively. Took a huge short position, betting the pound would fall.
And the Bank of England tried to stop it.
They threw everything at it, buying billions of pounds, jacked up interest rates to 15% at one point.
Wow.
But the market pressure, fueled partly by Soros's bet, was just too much.
So the UK had to pull out of the ERM.
Yep. And the pound. It tumbled.
And Soros made
reportedly over $1 billion on that one event.
$1 billion. That's staggering. No wonder he got that nickname, the man who broke the Bank of England.
It stuck, didn't it? And the text notes, interestingly, that his fund stopped taking outside money in 2011.
Yeah, that seems like a big shift. Maybe focusing more on the philanthropy side after that.
It certainly coincided with that, yeah. And his foundation network, the Open Society Foundations, the text describes it as one of the largest private charities on the planet.
Started in Hungary, you said, back in '84.
That's right. Then expanded really rapidly, especially after the fall of communism in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union.
And what do they actually do? The scope seems huge.
It is.
Yeah.
The core idea is promoting this concept of an open society.
Oh.
So supporting democratic institutions, human rights, free
Yeah,
speech.
education, science, healthcare too, the text mentions.
Yeah, a whole range. They give grants to NGOs,
No.
support independent media, protect minority rights, lots of different activities.
Going back to those photocopiers, it feels like there's a personal connection driving this, right? His own past.
Oh, absolutely. The text really emphasizes that. Growing up under authoritarianism in Hungary,
Mm.
it clearly fueled this deep belief in, free access to information, freedom of thought.
So the photocopiers weren't just about making copies.
Not at all. It was about breaking the state's control over information. A small tool, maybe, but with a big philosophical punch, it shows that core idea.
Hmm.
Control information, you control society. He wanted to challenge that.
That makes a lot of sense. And from, funding photocopiers, his involvement grew into some pretty major political activity, lobbying, globally, really.
For sure. The text suggests his foundations played a significant part in the fall of those communist regimes in Eastern Europe in '89.
Helping civil society groups, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Providing funding, support,
Mm-hmm.
helping create the conditions for change. Then in the U.S., the text points to big donations to the Democratic Party, backing progressive causes.
Like drug policy reform, climate change action.
Right. And he's never been shy about voicing his opinions, has he?
Definitely not. The text mentions him being very critical of leaders like Trump and Orban in Hungary and very supportive of Ukraine.
Yeah. And it's probably important we pause here, like the text does, and just say, we're reporting what the source says about his political activities.
Right, not endorsing any side, just laying out the information from the text.
Absolutely. Transparency is key.
Mm.
And speaking of his activities, the text has this interesting detail. He met with high-level Soviet officials way back in 1987 in Moscow.
Really? 87? That's quite early. Shows a long-term interest in the region, I guess.
That certainly suggests that, yeah.
Okay, what about his personal life? The text touches on that too.
It does, briefly. Mentions 3 marriages, 5 children from the first 2.
And his current wife, Tomiko Bolton.
Yes, his marriage to her. The text notes she's a yoga instructor, mentions the age difference, which, got some media attention.
But it also says she's an entrepreneur.
Right, the text adds that detail. She had her own successful business. So it paints a slightly fuller picture, not just a yoga instructor.
And his son, Alexander, he seems to be stepping up more now.
Very much so. The text highlights his role heading the Alexander Soros Foundation, and he's also chairman of the main Open Society Foundations now.
Taking over the reins, in a way.
Seems like it. And the text makes a point of saying Alexander reportedly has more access to the current White House administration than his father did recently.
Interesting. So the family influence continues, maybe just shifting slightly with the generation.
That's what the text seems to imply, yeah.
Yeah.
A continuity, but perhaps with different nuances or priorities.
Which almost inevitably brings us to the criticisms and the controversies. The text addresses these head-on.
It has to, really. They're a huge part of his public image. It mentions accusations about his financial activities causing instability, the speculator tag.
And the idea that his political funding is interfering in other countries, undermining sovereignty.
Yes, that's a major criticism leveled against him. And then, of course, there's the conspiracy theories. He's like the central casting for so many of them.
It's kind of wild how often his name pops up in those.
It really is. The text notes how he's often used as a target, especially by far-right politicians and populists, almost a boogeyman figure.
And in some countries, his foundations have actually faced restrictions.
Yes, the text mentions that too. Their activities have been curtailed or even banned in certain places.
And again, just to be super clear, we're relaying these criticisms as they appear in the source material.
Exactly. We're not validating them or refuting them, just reporting on what the text discusses. It actually frames it interestingly, suggesting criticism often slides into outright demonization.
Yeah, like he becomes the symbol for everything someone dislikes.
Pretty much. A villain figure across different political divides, which, as the text implies, is quite a unique and probably difficult position.
Okay, let's look a bit closer at his son's foundation, the Alexander Soros Foundation. The text says it focuses on social justice, human rights. Started in 2012.
Right. I give some concrete examples of groups they support, like Bend the Arc, the National Domestic Workers Alliance, Make the Road New York. Gives you a sense of their focus areas.
They fund research, too, something about domestic workers.
Yeah, a national study on domestic workers. So funding research is part of their strategy.
And they have an award, the ASF Award.
For activists working on environmental protection and human rights. The text lists recipients from all over Liberia, Cambodia, Peru, places like that.
So it really looks like Alexander is carrying on that philanthropic torch, but maybe with his own specific focus, like environmental justice, labor rights.
That's definitely the impression the text gives. Continuing the legacy, but perhaps reflecting some newer generational concerns more strongly.
Okay, let's circle back one more time to Black Wednesday, 1992. The text really dives into the mechanics of it.
Yeah, it explains the UK being in the ERM, trying to keep the pound steady.
And Soros making that massive bet against the pound, shorting it.
Right. And the text emphasizes how hard the Bank of England fought back, buying pounds like crazy, hiking interest rates dramatically.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it wasn't enough.
They had to give in, leave the ERM, and the pound dropped.
Exactly. And Soros walked away with, as we said, over $1 billion. Hence the nickname. The text also briefly mentions the economic fallout for Britain.
But there's a wrinkle in his motivation, isn't there? The text mentions his initial quote.
Yeah, the nothing personal, it's business line. Very detached, purely financial.
But later...
Later in his memoirs, apparently, he hinted at something maybe more personal, connected to his student days in London.
So maybe not just business.
Well, the text presents both sides. It shows how his own narrative might have evolved, or at least how complex his motivations might have been. It's not always straightforward.
Definitely not. And that complexity seems rooted in his early life, doesn't it? The text spends significant time on how those childhood experiences shaped everything.
Absolutely fundamental. Takes us right back to Budapest. Jewish family, rising anti-Semitism, then World War II. Unimaginable times.
The family changed their name from Schwartz to Soros.
Yes, to sound more Hungarian. A survival tactic. And then the text details George, just 14, having to pose as a Christian to stay alive, hiding his identity.
That must have been terrifying. And formative.
Hugely. The text quotes him saying it shaped his character, taught him to calculate everything in advance, think ahead constantly.
There's that difficult part where he talks about helping confiscate property from other Jews as part of his cover and feeling no guilt at the time.
Yeah, the text includes that. It's stark. But it presents it as his reflection on surviving under extreme duress.
Yeah.
Trying to understand that mindset.
And contrast that with his father's incredible bravery.
Yes. Forging documents, saving countless Jewish families, real heroism.
Yeah.
And George calling 1944 the happiest year of his life.
Which sounds strange at first.
But in the context of survival, of witnessing that courage from his father, maybe it makes a kind of desperate sense. The relief of making it through, seeing good prevail even in darkness.
So all of that, the hiding, the danger, the name change, his father's actions, the text argues it forged his core beliefs.
That's the core argument, yes. It led to his deep skepticism of rigid ideologies, any system that claims absolute truth. It fueled his belief in open societies where ideas can be challenged.
And maybe his willingness to take those big contrarian bets in the market too, going against the grain.
Very possibly. It all seems interconnected. His personal history seems deeply woven into his financial strategies and his philanthropy.
So, okay, wrapping this up. What we've done here, digging into this text, is hopefully paint a much fuller picture of George Soros, more than just the headlines.
Right. We've looked at his origins, his huge financial impact, and the ideas behind it, the massive scale of his philanthropy, the political involvement, which is obviously very debated.
Glimpsed his personal life, acknowledged the criticisms and the conspiracy theories that swirl around him.
Checked in on what his son Alexander is doing now, revisited key moments like Black Wednesday, and really tried to understand how profoundly those early years shaped him.
Yeah, and hopefully for you listening, this deep dive gives you that clearer, more nuanced view you were after. Those aha moments, maybe, without feeling totally overloaded.
That was the goal, a solid understanding of this really complex, really influential figure.
So here's a final thought to maybe leave you with. Considering everything Soros' incredible journey, the immense wealth, the drive to shape societies through his foundations, and now seeing his son step into that role. What does this ongoing story really tell us about how power works today? That intersection of, global money, huge charitable giving, and deeply held beliefs in the 21st century.
It's a big question. Definitely something worth pondering after we sign off.